The bridge of the Iron Will was quiet except for the soft hum of computers. Captain Juan sat in his command chair, looking out at the stars through the main window. His ship was on patrol near the edge of human space, far from Earth and far from any trouble. That was how he liked it. Mira, his navigation officer, sat at her station checking star charts. She was young but smart, and Juan trusted her completely. The rest of the bridge crew worked at their posts, keeping the ship running smoothly through the darkness of space. Then the signal came. It started as a soft beeping from the communications station. The officer there, a man named Jun, looked confused as he checked his screens. "Captain," he said, "I'm getting something strange. It's not from any human ship." Juan turned in his chair. "Put it on speakers." What filled the bridge was unlike anything they had heard before. It was not words or normal radio signals. Instead, it was something that sounded like music made of light, beautiful and sad at the same time. The sounds rose and fell like waves, creating patterns that somehow made sense even though no human should understand them. "What is that?" Mira asked, standing up from her station. Jun worked at his controls, trying to clean up the signal. "It's coming from deep space, Captain. Really deep. Maybe 20 star systems away, and it's being broadcast on every frequency at once." The music continued, and somehow Juan began to understand what it meant. It was not just beautiful sounds. It was a message, a cry for help so desperate and pure that it crossed the barriers between different species. The beings sending it were in terrible danger. "Can you translate it?" Juan asked. Jun shook his head. "The computer doesn't recognize the language. But, Captain, there's something else. The signal is getting weaker. Whatever is sending this is running out of power." Mira had moved to her own station and was working fast. "I'm trying to track where it's coming from," she said. Her fingers flew over the controls. "Got it. The signal is coming from a system called Lumina. It's listed in our star charts as home to a species called the Villani." Juan had heard of the Villani. They were one of the peaceful species in the galaxy, made of living crystal. They never fought wars and spent their time creating art and music. If they were calling for help, something very bad was happening. "What do we know about that system?" Juan asked. Mira pulled up the information. "Not much. The Villani keep to themselves. Their world is called Lumina Prime. The reports say it's beautiful, covered in crystal cities that sing in the wind. They've never asked anyone for help before." The music from the signal was getting sadder now, more desperate. Juan could feel the fear in it, even though he did not understand how. These beings were terrified of something coming for them. "Captain," Jun said, "I'm picking up other signals now. They're coming from all over the galaxy. It looks like everyone heard this call for help." "What are they saying?" Juan asked. Jun listened for a moment, then looked grim. "Most of them are saying the same thing. They can't help. They're too far away, or too weak, or too scared." Juan felt anger rise in his chest. Here was a peaceful species crying out for help, and the galaxy was turning its back on them. He thought about Earth, about how humans had learned to help each other when things got bad. It was one of the things that made them strong. "Mira," he said, "how fast could we get to Lumina Prime?" She did quick calculations. "At maximum speed. About 3 days. But, Captain, that would mean pushing our engines past safe limits. Most alien ships can't handle that kind of acceleration." "But we can." "Yes, sir. Human ships are built different. We're made to handle the stress." Juan nodded. Human ships were indeed different. They had to be. Earth was a dangerous world with strong gravity and wild weather. Human technology had developed to be tough and reliable. While other species built ships for comfort, humans built them to survive. "Sir," June said, "I'm getting a transmission from Earth Command. They want to know if we heard the alien signal." "Put them through." The voice of Admiral Taman filled the bridge. "Captain Juan, I assume you've heard the distress call from the Volani." "Yes, sir. They need help badly." "Indeed they do. I've been monitoring galactic communications. The Galactic Council is meeting right now to discuss the situation. Early reports suggest they're going to abandon the Volani system." Juan felt his hands clench into fists. "Abandon them? Why?" "Because they're afraid. The threat facing the Volani is something called the Harvester Swarm. It's an ancient weapon system that eats entire star systems. The Council thinks it's too dangerous to fight." "What do you think, Admiral?" There was a pause. "I think the Council has forgotten what it means to stand up for what's right. But I also think they might be right about the danger. This Harvester Swarm has been destroying worlds for thousands of years. No one has ever stopped it." Juan looked at his crew. They were all listening, and he could see the same anger in their eyes that he felt. These were good people who had signed up to protect others, not to run away when things got hard. "Admiral," Juan said, requesting permission to proceed to Lumina Prime. "Captain, that system is far outside human space. You would be on your own out there." "I understand, sir." Another pause. "Your ship alone wouldn't be enough, Captain. If you're serious about this, you'd need a fleet." "Then give me a fleet, sir." The bridge was completely quiet now. Everyone was waiting for the Admiral's answer. Finally, Taman spoke again. "Captain Juan, you are hereby ordered to return to Earth immediately for emergency fleet assembly. We're going to show the galaxy what humans do when innocents need help." Juan smiled for the first time since hearing the alien signal. "Yes, sir. We're on our way." As the Iron Will turned toward Earth, the Volani distress signal continued to play. The beautiful, sad music filled the bridge, reminding everyone on board why they were making this choice. Somewhere out there, peaceful beings made of living crystal were about to die unless someone helped them. The galaxy might be ready to give up, but humans never learned how to quit. They were about to remind everyone why Earth was called a death world, and why its children were the toughest beings in the galaxy. The race to save Lumina Prime was about to begin. The Galactic Council chamber was a massive dome that floated in space between 3 star systems. Representatives from hundreds of different species sat in their special seats, each designed for their unique bodies. The air was filled with the sounds of different languages being translated by computers, creating a constant buzz of noise. At the center of the chamber, a holographic display showed the Lumina system. The beautiful crystal world of the Volani spun slowly, its surface gleaming like a jewel. But dark clouds were moving toward it from deep space, representing the approaching Harvester Swarm. Hive Chancellor Vextar stood at the speaker's platform. He was from an insect species, tall and thin with 4 arms and compound eyes that saw in all directions. His voice was translated into hundreds of languages as he spoke. "Fellow beings of the galaxy," Vextar said, "we face a terrible choice. Today, the Volani have asked for our help, but the threat they face is beyond our power to stop." A section of the chamber lit up, and a figure made of living crystal appeared. This was Celestar, one of the few Volani who could speak the common galactic language. Her voice was like music, even when translated. "Honored Council," she said, "my people have lived in peace for 10,000 years. We have never asked for help before, but now we have no choice. The Harvester Swarm has already destroyed 17 star systems. We are next." The chamber filled with murmurs of sympathy, but also fear. Everyone had heard stories of the Harvester Swarm. It was an ancient weapon, built by a long-dead species to consume resources and build more of itself. For millennia, it had wandered the galaxy, eating everything in its path. "We understand your pain," Vextar said to Celestar, "but what you ask is impossible. The Harvester Swarm has never been defeated. Every fleet that has tried to stop it has been destroyed or absorbed into its mass." An ambassador from the warlike Krek species stood up. His people were known for their fighting skills, but even he looked scared. "My fleet has studied the swarm for generations," he said. "It learns from every attack. It adapts to every weapon. There is no way to defeat it." "Then what do you suggest?" Celestar asked, her crystal body flashing with desperate colors. "Should we simply die quietly so you don't have to feel guilty?" The chamber fell silent. Many representatives looked away from the Villani ambassador. They felt ashamed, but they also felt helpless. Vextar called for a vote. "All those in favor of sending a rescue fleet to Lumina Prime, raise your voting devices." A few hands and claws and tentacles went up, but not many. Most of the council sat still, staring at the floor or ceiling or anywhere except at Celestar. All, "Those against sending a rescue fleet." This time, hundreds of voting devices rose into the air. The decision was clear and overwhelming. "The motion fails," Vextar announced. "The Council will not authorize military action against the Harvester Swarm. We will, however, offer to accept Villani refugees if any manage to escape." Celestar's crystal body flickered with colors of sadness and anger. "Refugees," she repeated. "You offer to save a few of us while letting our entire civilization die." "It is all we can do," Vextar said, but his voice did not sound convinced. Meanwhile, on Earth, Admiral Tae Min sat in the war room deep underground. He had been listening to the council session through secure channels, and his face was red with anger. Around the table sat his best officers, all of them looking just as upset. "Cowards," Tae Min said, slamming his fist on the table. "Every last one of them." Commander Bo Young, his second-in-command, shook her head in disgust. "I've read the reports. On the Villani, sir. They're artists and musicians. They don't even have weapons. They're completely helpless." "What's our fleet status?" Tae Min asked. "We have 300 ships ready for immediate deployment," replied Captain Young-Soo. "Another 200 could be ready within 6 hours if we push the shipyards." Tae Min looked at the star map on the wall. Earth was marked with a small blue dot, while Lumina Prime was a distant green spark. The space between them seemed vast and empty. "Sir," Bo Young said carefully, "we should consider the risks. Humanity isn't officially part of the Galactic Council. If we act without permission, we could be seen as aggressors." "Aggressors?" Tae Min laughed bitterly. "For trying to save innocent lives while the rest of the galaxy hides like children?" Dr. Inho, the fleet's chief medical officer, spoke up. "Admiral, I've been studying Villani physiology. They're completely different from us. I'm not even sure our medical equipment will work on them if we have wounded." "Then you'll figure it out," Tae Min said. "That's what humans do. We adapt." "Engineer." Sojin raised her hand. "Sir, there's another problem. The distance to Lumina Prime is enormous. Our ships can make the journey, but most alien vessels can't handle the acceleration we'd need to get there in time. How much time do we have? Tae-min asked. Young-soo checked his calculations. According to the Villani transmission, the Harvester Swarm will reach their system in 5 days. If we leave within 12 hours and push our engines to maximum, we might make it with a few hours to spare. The room fell quiet as everyone considered what they were discussing. This would be the largest military operation in human history, launched to save aliens they had never met against an enemy that had never been defeated. "Admiral," Bo Young said, "are you sure about this? We could lose everything." Tae-min stood up and walked to the star map. He placed his hand on the spot where Earth was marked. "Bo Young, what did we call ourselves when we first reached the stars?" "The children of Earth, sir." "And what was Earth?" "A death world, sir. A planet that tried to kill us every day." "Exactly. We survived ice ages and plagues and wars and natural disasters that would have wiped out any other species. We didn't become the toughest beings in the galaxy by running away from fights." He turned to face his officers. "The Galactic Council thinks we're monsters from a dangerous world. Maybe they're right. But if we are monsters, then we're the kind of monsters who protect the innocent." Bo Young smiled. "What are your orders, Admiral?" "Contact every ship in the fleet. Tell them we're going to war against an enemy that has never been beaten. Tell them we're doing it to save people we've never met. And tell them that any captain who doesn't want to come can stay home without shame." "And if they all volunteer?" Young-soo asked. "Then we'll show the galaxy what Deathworlders can do when we're properly motivated." As the officers left to prepare the fleet, Tae-min remained alone in the war room. On the main screen, the Villani distress signal continued to play, its crystal music filling the quiet space. Somewhere out there, innocent beings were about to die while the galaxy's leaders did nothing. But Earth's children had never learned to accept the word impossible. They were about to remind the universe why their homeworld was considered the most dangerous place in known space and why its people were the most dangerous beings to threaten their friends. The fleet would launch within hours, and the galaxy would never be the same. The orbital shipyards around Earth had never seen such activity. Massive construction platforms that usually worked slowly and carefully were now moving at incredible speed. Sparks flew from welding torches as workers attached weapons and armor to ships. The night side of Earth glowed with the light of rocket engines as vessels rose from the surface to join the growing fleet. Captain Young-soo stood on the bridge of the dreadnought Prometheus, watching the organized chaos outside his windows. His ship was the largest in the human fleet, built like a floating fortress with armor thick enough to stop asteroid impacts. Right now, cargo ships were loading it with the most dangerous weapons humanity had ever created. "How many kinetic bombardment platforms can we carry?" Young-soo asked his weapons officer. 24, sir. Each one can drop tungsten rods from orbit with the force of nuclear weapons, but without the radiation." Young-soo nodded. Kinetic weapons were a human specialty. Most alien species thought they were crude and barbaric, but humans had learned that sometimes the simplest solutions were the best. A heavy metal rod dropped from space would hit with tremendous force, and there was no defense against simple. "Physics! Load them all," he ordered. "And double-check the targeting computers. We'll only get one chance at this." On another platform, engineer So-jin was supervising the installation of experimental fusion torpedoes on a squadron of destroyers. These weapons had never been tested in real combat, but the situation was too desperate for careful testing. "Are you sure these will work?" asked the destroyer captain, a woman named Yunji. "Honestly? No," So-jin replied. but they should create explosions hot enough to melt through anything. The theory is sound. Should is not the same as will, Yoonji pointed out. No, but it's all we have. The harvester swarm is made of metal and machinery. Hit it with enough heat and it should break down. So Jin hoped she was right. The fusion torpedoes used the same technology that powered human ships, but concentrated into weapons that could create tiny suns for a few seconds. If they worked, they would be devastating. If they failed, a lot of good people would die. Across the shipyard, Dr. Inho was having his own problems. He stood in the medical bay of the frigate Healing Light, surrounded by equipment designed to treat human injuries. None of it would work on crystal beings like the Volani. We need to completely redesign our medical protocols, he told his assistant, xenobiologist Ye Jin. The Volani don't have blood or bones or organs like we do. They're living crystal that somehow thinks and feels. Ye Jin was studying what little information they had about Volani biology. According to these reports, they can regenerate from almost any injury if their core crystal remains intact, but they're vulnerable to specific frequencies of sound and vibration. So we can't cut them open like human patients. But we might be able to heal them with the right kind of music? That's the theory. I'm trying to program our medical computers to generate healing frequencies, but without a live patient to test on, it's just guesswork. Inho looked out the window at the busy shipyard. We'll figure it out when we get there. We always do. The largest ship in the fleet was the carrier Stormbringer, commanded by Admiral Taemin himself. Its hangar bays were filled with fighters and bombers, each one designed for the high-speed combat that humans excelled at. These small ships could accelerate and turn faster than anything else in the galaxy, because their human pilots could survive forces that would kill other species. Commander Bo Young stood in the main hangar, addressing a group of fighter pilots. "Listen up," she said. "We're going up against an enemy that has been unbeaten for thousands of years. It learns from every attack and adapts to every weapon. Traditional tactics won't work." One of the pilots, a young man named Kyung-ho, raised his hand. "So, what do we do, Commander?" "We do what humans do best. We improvise. We adapt faster than the enemy can learn. We use tactics so crazy that no sane species would try them." "Such as?" Bo Young smiled grimly. "Such as ramming attacks, such as using our ships as guided missiles, such as fighting so close to the enemy that we're practically inside their formations." The pilots looked nervous, but also excited. This was the kind of combat they had trained for their entire careers. Human fighter doctrine was based on speed, aggression, and the willingness to take risks that other species considered suicidal. Throughout the fleet, similar preparations were taking place. Tactical Officer Hyun Woo was programming targeting, computers with data about the harvester swarm's known capabilities. Communication Officer Jun was setting up quantum entanglement links so the fleet could coordinate instantly across vast distances. Every human ship was being turned into a weapon of war. But the most important work was happening in the minds of the crews. These were people who had grown up hearing stories about Earth's dangerous past. They knew their ancestors had survived ice ages and asteroid impacts and global wars. They carried that toughness in their genes and their culture. "Attention all ships!" Admiral Taemin's voice rang out across the fleet communication channels. "This is Admiral Taemin. In 6 hours, we will depart for Lumina Prime to face an enemy that the rest of the galaxy fears to fight." The Admiral paused, letting his words sink in. "I won't lie to you. Many of us may not come home. The harvester swarm has destroyed civilizations older and more advanced than ours. but there are innocent people out there who will die if we don't act. Hundreds of ships, thousands of crew members listened in silence. The Galactic Council calls us Deathworlders, as if that's something to be ashamed of. They think we're monsters from a dangerous planet. Today we'll show them they're right. We are monsters. We're the kind of monsters who travel across the galaxy to protect the innocent. Cheers erupted from ships throughout the fleet. These were humans, and they had never learned to back down from a fight when others needed help. The Villani are artists and musicians who have never hurt anyone, Taman continued. They create beauty in a universe that often seems dark and cruel. If we let them die, we become less than human. If we save them, we prove that Earth's children are worthy of the stars. More cheers, louder this time. On the bridge of the iron. Will, Captain Juan felt pride swell in his chest. This was why humanity had left Earth and reached for the stars, not to conquer or dominate, but to protect and preserve. Fleet status report, Taman requested. One by one, ship captains reported. Their readiness. The dreadnought Prometheus with its kinetic weapons. The carrier Stormbringer with its fighters. The medical frigate Healing Light with its hastily modified equipment. Destroyers and cruisers and support vessels, all crewed by humans who had decided that some things were worth fighting for. All ships report ready for departure, Admiral, Bo Young announced. Then let's go save some crystal people, Taman said. The human fleet began to move, hundreds of ships turning toward the deep space where Lumina Prime waited. Their engines burned bright against the darkness, creating a river of light that could be seen from Earth's surface. Behind them, the planet that had given birth to humanity spun quietly in space. It was a world of storms and earthquakes and dangerous weather, a place that had tried to kill its children for millions of years. But those children had survived and grown strong, and now they were carrying that strength to the stars. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when Deathworlders decided to go to war. The human fleet stretched across space like a glowing arrow pointed at the stars. 300 ships moved together, their fusion engines burning at maximum power. The acceleration would have killed most alien species, but humans had evolved on a high-gravity world where only the strong survived. Captain Juan stood on the bridge of the Iron Will, feeling the force of acceleration pressing him into his chair. Around him, his crew worked at their stations with calm efficiency. This was what they had trained for their entire careers. Engine status? Juan asked. Running at 110% of rated capacity, Engineer Sojin replied from the engine room. We're pushing the limits, but the reactors are holding steady. Navigation Officer Mira was constantly checking their course and speed. At current acceleration, we'll reach Lumina Prime in 4 days and 8 hours. That gives us about 16 hours before the Harvester Swarm arrives. It would be close, but they might make it in time. The key was maintaining this dangerous speed. Without destroying their own ships, human technology was tough, but even it had limits. Incoming transmission from Lumina Prime, Communication Officer Jun announced. Put it through, Juan ordered. The beautiful crystal music of the Villani filled the bridge, but this time it was accompanied by translated words. The voice belonged to Kelestar, the Villani scientist who had spoken to the Galactic Council. Human. Fleet, this is Celestar of Lumina Prime. We are monitoring your approach and are amazed by your speed. No ship in galactic history has ever traveled so fast. That's because no one else was crazy enough to try, Mira muttered. Juan activated the communication system. Celestar, this is Captain Juan of the Terran Defense Fleet. What is your current situation? We are evacuating our cities. Celestar replied. Our children are being moved to the deep caves where the ancient song libraries are stored. We hope they will be safe there when the harvester swarm arrives. The sadness in her voice was clear even through the translation system. These people were preparing to die to protect their children and their culture. How much time do you have? Juan asked. Our sensors show the swarm will enter our system in 5 days. It moves like a dark cloud, consuming everything in its path. Captain, we have seen the records of what it did to other worlds. Nothing survives. Juan looked around his bridge. His crew was listening to every word, and he could see the determination in their faces. They would not let these people die. Celestar, we will be there before the swarm arrives. Hold on. We will try, Captain, and thank you. Even if you cannot, save us. You have given us hope in our final days. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in silence. Outside the windows, stars streaked past as the ship moved faster than any vessel in galactic history. Captain, Jun said, I'm monitoring galactic communications. The other species are talking about us. What are they saying? Most of them think we're insane. The Krex military command says we're going to die uselessly. The Council is demanding that we turn back. Admiral Taman's voice came over the fleet communication channel. All ships, this is Admiral Taman. I'm sure you've all heard the galactic chatter about our mission. Let me be clear. We will not turn back. We will not abandon the Volani, and we will show the galaxy what humans can do when we put our minds to it. On the dreadnought Prometheus, Captain Young-Soo was reviewing intelligence reports about the Harvester swarm. What he read was terrifying. The ancient weapon system had destroyed entire star systems, consuming planets and moons to build more. Of itself, it's like a cancer, he told his tactical officer. It spreads and grows and consumes everything it touches. How do you fight something like that? Very carefully, and with a lot of explosives. Young-Soo had been a soldier for 20 years. He had fought pirates and rebels and hostile aliens. But this was different. This was an enemy that had never been defeated. An ancient machine designed to destroy civilizations. But humans had one advantage that other species lacked. They were used to fighting impossible odds. Earth had taught them that survival sometimes required doing things that seemed crazy. In the medical bay of the Healing Light, Dr. In-Ho was working with xenobiologist Ye Jin to prepare for Volani casualties. They had managed to reprogram some of their equipment to generate the sound frequencies that could heal crystal beings. This is all theoretical, Ye Jin said as she calibrated a healing device. We've never actually treated a Volani patient. Then we'll learn fast, In-Ho replied. It's what humans do. They had also prepared for human casualties. This battle would be unlike anything they had faced before. The Harvester swarm was known for turning captured ships and crews into more of itself. Any human who was taken would become part of the enemy. Commander Bo Young was in the fighter bays of the Stormbringer, making final preparations with her pilots. These men and women would be the first to engage the swarm, flying small ships against an enemy the size of a moon. Remember, she told them, speed is our advantage. We can accelerate and turn faster than anything the swarm has. Use that. Don't let them get a lock on you. Pilot Kyung-Ho raised his hand. Commander, what if our weapons don't work? The reports say the swarm adapts to any attack. Then we adapt faster. Humans have been improvising solutions since we lived in caves. If the first plan doesn't work, we try a second plan. If that fails, we try a third. We keep trying until something works, or we run out of ships. The fighters were small and fast, designed for hit-and-run attacks. Each one carried fusion missiles and kinetic weapons. Against a normal enemy, they would be devastating. Against the Harvester swarm, they might not even be noticed. But Bo Young had faith in her pilots. They were humans, raised on stories of impossible victories and last-minute rescues. They would find a way to make a difference. As the fleet raced through space, Tactical Officer Hyun Woo was analyzing every piece of data they had about the Harvester swarm. There had to be a weakness, some flaw that could be exploited. The swarm learns from every attack, he reported to Admiral Tae-min. But there's a delay in its adaptation process. If we can hit it with something completely new, we might have a few minutes before it adjusts. How long is the delay? Based on historical records, approximately 3 to 5 minutes for energy weapons, longer for physical attacks. That's not much time. No, sir, but it might be enough. The human fleet continued its desperate race across the galaxy. Behind them, Earth grew smaller and dimmer. Ahead of them lay Lumina Prime and the most dangerous enemy in galactic history. In his quarters, Captain Huan recorded a message for his family back on Earth. If you're hearing this, it means we didn't make it back. But know that we died trying to save innocent people. That's what humans do. That's what makes us worthy of the stars. Similar messages were being recorded throughout the fleet. Soldiers writing letters to children they might never see again. Engineers explaining technical procedures to colleagues who would carry on their work. Doctors sharing medical knowledge that might save lives in future battles. They were racing toward almost certain death, but they were doing it willingly. The Villani were strangers from a distant world, but they were innocent beings who needed help. That was enough for humans to risk everything. The galaxy might call them deathworlders and monsters, but they were monsters with hearts. And sometimes, the universe needed monsters who cared about others more than they cared about their own safety. Time was running out, but the children of Earth were coming. The Harvester swarm was about to learn what happened when predators threatened humanity's friends. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Lumina system, and every person who saw what waited there felt their blood turn cold. The Harvester swarm stretched across space like a metallic nightmare, millions of dark machines moving together in perfect coordination. Captain Huan stood on the bridge of the Iron Will, staring at the main display screen. The swarm was larger than anything in the intelligence reports. It filled the space between planets like a black cancer, consuming asteroids and small moons as it moved toward Lumina Prime. "Dear God," whispered Navigation Officer Mira. "How do we fight something that big?" The swarm was not just large, it was alive in a way that machines should not be. Individual units the size of buildings flowed together like a liquid, combining and separating as needed. Smaller ships darted between the larger masses like metallic fish in a dark ocean. Tactical analysis, Admiral Tae-min ordered from the flagship Stormbringer. Tactical Officer Hyun-woo worked at his station, trying to make sense of what they were seeing. The swarm appears to be made up of millions of individual units, ranging from fighter-sized drones to structures larger than our biggest ships. They're all connected somehow, sharing information instantly. Any obvious weaknesses? Not from this distance, sir. But I'm detecting massive energy signatures from the center of the formation. There might be a control unit or central brain directing the whole thing. Captain Young-soo aboard the Prometheus was thinking the same thing. If we can identify the command structure, we might be able to disrupt their coordination. Agreed, Admiral Tae-min replied. But first, we need to test their defenses. Young-Su, take your squadron and probe their outer edge. Let's see how they react to a small attack. Young-Su felt his stomach tighten. He was being asked to fly into the mouth of a monster that had never been defeated. But someone had to go first, and the Prometheus was the toughest ship in the fleet. Understood, Admiral. Moving to attack position. The dreadnought and 5 destroyer escorts broke away from the main fleet, heading toward the swarm's nearest edge. As they approached, the enemy began to change. Units that had been moving randomly suddenly snapped into formation, turning toward the human ships like a predator focusing on prey. Energy signatures increasing, reported the Prometheus's sensor officer. They know we're here. Young-Su gripped his command chair as his ship closed the distance. All weapons. Target the largest concentrations of enemy units. Fire on my command. The human ships opened fire with everything they had. Kinetic weapons launched tungsten rods at incredible speed. Energy beams cut through space like swords of light. Fusion missiles traced bright paths toward their targets. For a moment, it looked like the attack was working. Explosions blossomed throughout the swarm's formation as human weapons found their marks. Dozens of enemy units were destroyed or damaged, their wreckage spinning away into space. Then the swarm began to adapt. "Sir," the sensor officer called out, "the enemy is changing their formations. They're spreading out to reduce the effectiveness of our area weapons." "And their shields are strengthening," added the weapons officer. "Our energy beams are having less effect." Young-Su watched in horror as the swarm learned from their attack in real time. New defensive patterns emerged as if by magic. Units that had been vulnerable moments before now shrugged off human weapons like raindrops. "Sir, multiple enemy contacts approaching fast," the sensor officer warned. The swarm's response was swift and overwhelming. Hundreds of fighter-sized units broke away from the main formation, moving toward the human ships with deadly purpose. They moved in patterns that no organic pilot could follow, coordinating their attacks with mechanical precision. "Evasive maneuvers," Young-Su ordered. The human ships tried to dodge, but the enemy was too fast and too coordinated. Weapons fire filled the space around them as the swarm units attacked from all directions. The destroyers' lightning and thunder took multiple hits, their shields failing under the concentrated assault. "Lightning is losing power," came the report over the communication channel. "Engine damage, weapons offline." Thunder reporting hull. "Breaches on decks 3 through 7. Young-Su realized they were about to lose 2 ships in their first encounter with the enemy. "All ships, fall back to the main fleet. Emergency acceleration." The surviving human vessels turned and ran, leaving the damaged destroyers behind. Young-Su watched on his screens as swarm units surrounded the crippled ships. What happened next made his blood run cold. The enemy didn't just destroy the human vessels. They began to take them apart piece by piece, analyzing every component. Worse, they were doing something to the crew members who were still alive, connecting them to the swarm's network. "Admiral," Young-Su reported with a heavy heart, "we've lost lightning and thunder." The enemy didn't just destroy them. They absorbed them. The bridge of the Stormbringer was silent as Admiral Taemin processed this information. They had just learned that the Harvester swarm was even more dangerous than they had imagined. It didn't just consume resources, it consumed knowledge, experience, and even living beings. "What did we learn from the attack?" Taemin asked. Tactical Officer Hyunwoo had been analyzing the data from the failed assault. "The enemy adapts within minutes to any weapon system. But, sir, I noticed something important. There was a delay before they started changing their defenses." "How long?" "Approximately 4 minutes for energy weapons, 6 minutes for kinetic weapons. It's as if they need time to process new information and distribute it throughout their network. That's our window, Commander Bo-young said. If we can hit them with something completely new, we have a few minutes before they adapt. Dr. Inho's voice came over the communication channel from the medical frigate. Admiral, I've been analyzing the sensor data from the attack. The swarm isn't just mechanical. Some of those units show biological components. They're part machine, part living tissue. What does that mean for our weapons? Taemin asked. It means they might be vulnerable to biological warfare. Diseases, toxins, things that affect living cells rather than metal and circuits. Do we have anything like that? Not exactly. But I might be able to develop something if we can capture a piece of the swarm for analysis. Engineer So-jin spoke up from her station. Admiral, I've been thinking about the fusion torpedoes. The swarm has never seen human fusion technology before. If we can modify them to create electromagnetic pulses instead of just explosions, we might be able to disrupt their network communications. Taemin looked around at his officers. These people were already thinking of new ways to fight an enemy that had just proven it could adapt to anything they threw at it. This was what made humans dangerous in the galaxy. They never stopped trying to find solutions. What about their central command structure? He asked. Still analyzing, Hyunwoo replied. But based on the coordination we saw, there has to be something directing the whole swarm. If we could find it and destroy it, the individual units might become much less effective. On the bridge of the Iron Will, Captain Hwan was coming to the same conclusion. Mira, can you calculate a course that would take us through their formation to the center? It would be suicide, sir. The swarm would tear us apart before we got halfway there. Not if we were moving fast enough and had enough cover. Hwan was forming an idea, a plan so dangerous that it would normally be considered insane, but humans specialized in plans that other species thought were impossible. Throughout the fleet, similar conversations were taking place. Engineers were modifying weapons they had never tested. Doctors were preparing for injuries they had never seen. Pilots were planning attack runs that violated every rule of safe combat. The first encounter with the Harvester swarm had been a disaster. 2 ships lost, dozens of crew members absorbed into the enemy network, but it had also taught them valuable lessons about their enemy. The swarm was powerful and adaptive, but it was not perfect. It had weaknesses, and humans were very good at finding and exploiting weaknesses. Admiral Taemin opened a channel to the entire fleet. All ships, this is Admiral Taemin. We've just had our first taste of what we're up against. It's worse than we thought, but it's not hopeless. He paused, letting his words sink in. The enemy learns from every attack, but they need time to adapt. That gives us windows of opportunity. We're going to use every one of those windows. We're going to modify our weapons, change our tactics, and fight in ways that no one has ever fought before. We're going to be unpredictable, aggressive, and absolutely relentless. The Volani are counting on us. The galaxy is watching us, and somewhere out there, our lost crew members are trapped in that monster, hoping we'll find a way to free them. Today, we show the universe what Deathworlders can do when we're really angry. The human fleet regrouped at the edge of the Lumina system, but they were not retreating. Instead, they were preparing to fight in ways that no galactic civilization had ever imagined. Admiral Taemin stood in the command center of the storm, Bringer, surrounded by his officers as they planned their next attack. The swarm adapts to conventional weapons, Engineer So-jin reported, but they've never faced human unconventional warfare. I've modified our fusion torpedoes to create electromagnetic pulse bursts. It should disrupt their communications for several minutes. What about the kinetic weapons? Captain Young-soo asked from the Prometheus. I'm loading them with modified warheads. Instead of simple tungsten rods, we're using packets of radioactive dust and metal fragments. When they hit, they'll create clouds of debris that interfere with sensors and communications. Dr. Inho added his own contribution. I've been working with the Villani scientist Celestar. She's provided information about sound frequencies that disrupt crystalline structures. If the swarm has absorbed any Villani technology, this might affect them. Tactical Officer Hyun Woo had been studying the swarm's movements. Sir, I think I've identified their command structure. There's a massive unit at the center of their formation, about the size of a moon. All the smaller units seem to orient toward it. That's our target, Admiral Taman decided. But we'll need a distraction to get close enough. Commander Bo Young smiled grimly. Leave that to the fighters, sir. We've been practicing some new maneuvers. What the humans were planning would have been considered suicide by any other species. But humans had learned their warfare on a planet that tried to kill them every day. They were used to turning disadvantages into advantages. The attack began, with something the galaxy had never seen before. Instead of approaching the swarm in neat formations, the human fleet scattered in all directions. Ships moved independently, using the system's planets and asteroids for cover. Captain Huan took the Iron Will on a course that brought him dangerously close to Lumina Prime's largest moon. Mira, calculate a gravity slingshot around the moon. I want maximum velocity. Sir, that will put us on a collision course with the swarm's main formation. Exactly. The Iron Will dove toward the moon, using its gravity to accelerate beyond safe limits. As it swung around the celestial body, it fired every weapon it had at the swarm units guarding the approach to their command ship. At the same time, the Prometheus was approaching from the opposite direction, using an asteroid field as cover. Captain Young-Soo waited until the last possible moment before firing his modified kinetic weapons. The tungsten rods struck swarm units and exploded into clouds of radioactive debris. The effect was immediate and devastating. Enemy ships that flew into the clouds found their sensors blinded and their communications jammed. It's working, Young-Soo reported. They can't coordinate their defenses through the debris fields. But the humans were just getting started. Commander Bo Young led her fighter squadron in an attack that defied all logic. Instead of trying to avoid the enemy, her pilots flew directly into the heart of the swarm formation, weaving between massive enemy units at speeds that should have been impossible. Remember, she called over the communication channel, use their size against them. They're too big to change direction quickly. The human fighters darted through the enemy formation like angry wasps, too small and fast for the larger swarm, units to target effectively. When the enemy did try to engage them, the fighters used a tactic that horrified galactic observers. They rammed the enemy ships, not to destroy themselves, but to plant explosive charges on enemy hulls before breaking, away at the last second. Pilot Kyung-ho flew his fighter within meters of a swarm cruiser, attached a fusion charge to its hull, then escaped just before the explosion tore the enemy ship apart. Ramming attacks? The Krek's military observers couldn't believe what they were seeing. Are these humans insane? But the tactic was working. The swarm had never faced enemies willing to get close enough to touch them. Their defensive systems were designed for long-range combat, not for dealing with opponents who fought at knife-fighting distance. Engineer Sojin's modified fusion torpedoes were creating havoc throughout the swarm formation. Each explosion sent electromagnetic pulses through enemy networks, causing units to lose coordination and collide with each other. The swarm is trying to adapt, Tactical Officer Hyun-Woo reported. But they can't process this many different types of attacks at once. Dr. Inho was working with Volani scientist Celestar to deploy their sonic weapons. The crystalline being had been brought aboard the healing light to help calibrate the frequency generators. "The swarm has absorbed some of our technology," Celestar explained. "If you can generate the right harmonic frequencies, you should be able to disrupt those components." "What frequency do we need?" "Try this pattern." Celestar sang a complex sequence of notes that the ship's computers translated into electromagnetic signals. The human ships began broadcasting the Volani harmony across all frequencies. The effect on the swarm was immediate and strange. Units that had been moving in perfect coordination suddenly began to shudder and break apart. "It's working," Dr. Inho announced. "The sonic attack is causing system failures throughout their formation, but the humans' greatest advantage was their unpredictability. While other species fought according to established doctrines and tactics, humans improvised constantly. When one attack stopped working, they immediately tried something different." "Captain, Youngsu discovered that swarm units were vulnerable when they tried to absorb damaged human ships. They lower their defenses to analyze new technology," he reported. "If we can fake being disabled, we might be able to get close enough for point-blank attacks." The Prometheus shut down its engines and weapons, drifting toward a cluster of swarm units as if it were a derelict vessel. The enemy ships approached cautiously, extending mechanical tendrils to begin their analysis. At the last moment, Youngsu reactivated his ship's systems and fired every weapon directly into the swarm units. At point-blank range, the explosions destroyed several enemy ships and created another debris field that interfered with swarm communications. Commander Bo Young was leading her fighters in attacks that violated every rule of space combat. Her pilots flew formation, patterns that used the enemy's own ships as shields, forcing the swarm to shoot at their own units to target the human fighters. "This is insane," one of her pilots, Yunji, called over the radio. "We're fighting inside their formation." "Insane is what we do best," Bo Young replied. "The crazier we get, the harder it is for them to predict our moves." The battle was chaotic beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human ships appeared and disappeared throughout the swarm formation, striking from unexpected angles and using tactics that no computer could have predicted. But the humans were paying a price for their aggression. The destroyer Braveheart was caught by enemy fire and torn apart. The fighter squadron, led by pilot Min Su, was overwhelmed and destroyed. Good people were dying to buy time for the main assault. Through it all, Captain Juan was fighting his way toward the swarm's command ship. The Iron Will had taken heavy damage, but it was still moving. Navigation Officer Mira kept them on course despite enemy fire that would have destroyed most vessels. "How close are we to the command unit?" Juan asked. 2,000 kilometers and closing. "But sir, the enemy is concentrating their defenses around it. We're flying into the heaviest fire in the battle." "Then we better move fast." The Iron Will accelerated toward the massive enemy command ship, its engines burning beyond all safety limits. Around them, the space battle raged as human and swarm forces clashed in ways that defied all military logic. Admiral Tae-min watched. The battle from the Stormbringer, coordinating attacks and sending reinforcements where they were needed most. "Status report on the central assault?" "Captain Juan is approaching the command ship," reported Communication Officer Jun. "But he's taking heavy fire. I don't think his ship can survive much more damage." "What about our other units?" "The sonic attacks are still disrupting swarm coordination. The debris fields are limiting their mobility." "But sir, they're starting to adapt to our tactics." Taemin nodded grimly. They had known this would happen. The swarm would eventually figure out how to counter human tactics. The question was whether they could destroy the command ship before that happened. All ships, this is Admiral Taemin. Captain Huan is making his final approach to the enemy command unit. I want every ship in the fleet to support his attack. Everything we have, everything we are, is focused on destroying that target. The human fleet responded with desperate courage. Ships that had been scattered throughout the system turned toward the swarm's center, converging on the massive command unit. They flew through enemy fire that tore apart armor and shattered hulls, but they kept coming. The children of Earth were showing the galaxy what Deathworlders could do when they fought for something greater than themselves. They were proving that sometimes the most dangerous monsters were the ones who protected the innocent. The battle for Lumina Prime had reached its final desperate phase. The Harvester Swarm, recognizing the threat that humanity posed, began pulling its scattered units back toward its massive command ship. The moon-sized vessel sat at the center of the enemy formation like a metallic heart, pumping coordination signals to millions of smaller units. Captain Huan stood on the damaged bridge of the Iron Will, watching as his ship fought its way through the heaviest enemy fire he had ever seen. Sparks flew from overloaded systems, and the smell of burning electronics filled the air. His ship was dying around him, but they were close to their target. "Distance to the command ship?" he asked. Navigation Officer Mira checked her instruments, with hands that shook from exhaustion. 800 kilometers, sir, but our shields are down to 12%. One more direct hit, and we're finished. Weapons status? Kinetic launchers are offline. Energy weapons are operating at 30% power. We still have our full load of fusion torpedoes. Huan nodded grimly. The torpedoes were their most powerful weapons, but they had to get close enough to use them effectively. The swarm's command ship was protected by layers of defensive systems that could intercept missiles fired from long range. "Sir," communication. Officer Jun said, "Admiral Taemin is requesting an update on your status. Tell him we're almost in position. And Jun, tell him it's been an honor serving with him." Throughout the fleet, similar conversations were taking place. The human ships were battered and bleeding, but they kept fighting. This was what separated them from other species in the galaxy. When faced with impossible odds, they didn't surrender. They got angry. On the medical frigate Healing Light, Dr. Inho was working frantically to save wounded crew members. His medical bay was filled with injured humans and several Volani refugees they had rescued during the battle. "Doctor," xenobiologist Ye Jin called out, "the Volani scientist Celestar wants to speak with you." Inho looked up from the human patient he was treating. Celestar's crystal body was flickering with urgent colors, and her translated voice carried desperate urgency. "Doctor, I have discovered something important about the swarm's command ship. It is not just a control center. It is the core replicator, the original machine that creates all the others." "What does that mean?" "If you can destroy it completely, the entire swarm network will collapse, but it must be total destruction. If even a small piece survives, it will rebuild everything." Inho felt his heart race. How do we achieve total destruction of something that size? The command ship's power core is based on matter-antimatter reactions. If you could cause it to overload, the explosion would be enough to destroy the entire structure, and everything within 1,000 kilometers of it. Inho added quietly. The implications were clear. To destroy the swarm's command ship, someone would have to sacrifice themselves. It would be a suicide mission with no possibility of survival. Inho activated his communication system. "Admiral Taemin, this is Dr. Inho. I have critical information about the enemy command ship." While Inho explained what Celestar had discovered, the battle around the command ship was intensifying. The swarm had concentrated its defenses around the massive vessel, creating a nearly impenetrable wall of enemy units. Commander Bo Young led her remaining fighters in desperate attacks against the defensive perimeter. Her squadron had been reduced to less than half its original strength, but the surviving pilots fought with the fury of cornered wolves. "We need to clear a path for Captain Juan," she called over the radio. "All fighters ramming attacks on the defensive grid. Give the Iron Will a corridor to the target." Pilot Kyung-ho was the first to respond. His fighter was already damaged, its hull cracked from enemy fire. "I'll take the left flank," he said calmly. "Kyung-ho, your ship won't survive a ramming attack." "No, Commander. Tell my family I died protecting innocent people." Before Bo Young could respond, Kyung-ho's fighter accelerated toward the enemy defensive line. He crashed into a swarm cruiser at full speed, the explosion of his fusion reactor tearing a hole in the enemy formation. Other pilots followed his example. One by one, damaged human fighters threw themselves at the enemy defenses, trading their lives for gaps in the swarm's protective wall. "They're clearing a path," Mira reported from the Iron Will. "Sir, we have a corridor to the command ship." Juan felt pride and sorrow fighting in his chest. Good people were dying to give him this chance. He could not waste their sacrifice. All power to engines. "Take us through." The Iron Will accelerated through the gap created by the fighter pilot's sacrifice. Enemy fire converged on the ship from all directions, but somehow it kept flying. The hull was torn and burning, but the fusion reactor still pulsed with power. Admiral Taemin watched from the Stormbringer as Juan's ship approached the enemy command vessel. He had just received Dr. Inho's report about the need for complete destruction of the target. "Captain Juan," he said over the communication channel, "we've learned that the command ship must be completely destroyed to stop the swarm. Are you prepared for a terminal attack?" There was a pause before Juan responded. "I understand, Admiral. Engineer Sojin is modifying our reactor for overload. We'll take the command ship with us. Captain, there might be another way." "No, sir. This is the only way to be sure. It's been an honor serving under your command." On the engineering deck of the Iron Will, Sojin was working frantically to prepare the ship's fusion reactor for a catastrophic overload. She had done the calculations. When the reactor exploded, it would create a chain reaction that would tear a hole in space-time itself. "How long do we have?" Juan asked over the intercom. "Once I start the overload sequence, we'll have about 3 minutes before the explosion," Sojin replied. "That should be enough time to penetrate the command ship's hull and get deep inside their structure." "Will 3 minutes be enough to reach the center?" "It will have to be, sir." So, Jin looked around the engineering bay where she had worked for 5 years. She thought about her daughter back on Earth, about the stories she would never be able to tell her. Then she thought about the Villani children hiding in crystal caves, waiting to see if they would live or die. She activated the overload sequence. Throughout the ship, alarms began to sound. The fusion reactor's containment fields started to fluctuate, as Sojin carefully destabilized the matter-antimatter reaction that powered their vessel. "Overload sequence initiated," she announced. 3 minutes to reactor breach." The Iron Will accelerated toward the swarm command ship, its engines burning, with the fury of a dying star. Enemy weapons fire struck the hull again and again, but the ship kept coming. Juan sat in his command chair, watching as the massive enemy vessel grew larger in the main viewer. It was like flying into the mouth of a mechanical god, but he felt no fear. He was a human being, a child of Earth, and his species had never learned to fear death when others needed protection. 2 minutes to reactor breach, Sojin reported. The iron will struck the command ship's outer hull and kept going, smashing through defensive barriers and armor plating. The ship's structure groaned and buckled, but its momentum carried it deeper into the enemy vessel. 1 minute to reactor breach. They were inside the command ship now, flying through corridors large enough to hold entire cities. Around them, the swarm's central brain tried to understand what was happening. Mechanical systems that had operated for thousands of years suddenly faced something they had never encountered before. A human being who had chosen to die rather than let innocent people suffer. 30 seconds to reactor breach. Juan opened a channel to the entire human fleet. This is Captain Juan. In a few seconds, the Iron Will be destroyed. But we're taking the swarm's command ship with us. It's been an honor to serve with all of you. He paused, thinking of Earth and the blue skies he would never see again. Tell the galaxy that we came from a world that tried to kill us every day, but we learned to protect others instead of just ourselves. Tell them that's what makes us human. 10 seconds to reactor breach. The Iron Will reached the center of the command ship, where the massive matter-antimatter reactor that powered the entire swarm pulsed with dark energy. Sojin's modifications to their own reactor had created an unstable cascade that was about to tear space itself apart. Reactor breach in 3, 2, 1. The explosion was visible from the other side of the star system. The Iron Will's fusion reactor went critical just as it reached the swarm's power core, creating a chain reaction that consumed both vessels in a ball of pure energy. For a moment, a new star blazed in the darkness of space. Then the light faded, leaving nothing but expanding waves of radiation and debris. Throughout the swarm formation, the effect was immediate. Without the command ship's coordination signals, millions of individual units suddenly lost their connection to the central network. They began to drift aimlessly, their artificial intelligence too simple to function without constant guidance. The Harvester swarm, terror of the galaxy for 10,000 years, was finally dead. But the price had been terrible. Good people had died to achieve this victory, people with families and dreams and futures that would never be. The silence that followed the destruction of the Harvester swarm was deeper than the void of space itself. Across the Lumina system, millions of swarm units drifted helplessly, their coordination network severed forever. The ancient terror that had consumed 17 star systems was finally dead. Admiral Tamin stood on the bridge of the Stormbringer, watching as the last enemy units powered down and went dark. His fleet was scattered across the system, many ships damaged beyond repair, but they had won. The impossible had been achieved. Fleet status report, he ordered quietly. Commander Bo Young, her voice heavy with exhaustion and grief, began the grim accounting. We lost 47 ships, including the Iron Will. Total casualties are estimated at over 2,000 personnel. The numbers felt like physical blows. Each ship represented dozens of crew members, each casualty a person with a name and a family. Captain Juan, Engineer So Jin, Pilot Kyung Ho, and so many others would never see Earth again. Sir, Communication Officer Jun said, we're receiving transmissions from across the galaxy. Everyone heard about the battle. Put the Villani through first. The crystal music of Celestar filled the bridge, but this time it was different. Instead of desperation and fear, the harmonies spoke of joy and gratitude beyond words. When the translation came through, many of the human crew found themselves crying. People of Earth, Celestar sang, you have given us back our lives, our world, our future. The children who hid in the deep caves are emerging into sunlight again. Our cities ring with songs of thanksgiving that will echo through the crystals for 1,000 generations. Taman activated the communication system. Celestar, this is Admiral Taman. We're just glad we could help. Help? The Volani scientist's laughter was like chimes in the wind. You didn't just help us? You saved the entire galaxy from a terror that had ruled for millennia. The Harvester swarm is finally gone. As if to confirm her words, reports began flooding in from across known space. The swarm units that had been attacking other systems had all gone silent simultaneously. Worlds that had been under siege for months suddenly found themselves free. Admiral, June reported, I'm getting communications from the Galactic Council. They're asking for an emergency session. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was unlike any in galactic history. Representatives from hundreds of species crowded into the Great Chamber, all talking at once. The air buzzed with excitement, disbelief, and something that had been absent from galactic politics for generations: hope. Hive Chancellor Vextar stood at the speaker's platform, but his usual arrogant confidence was gone. His compound eyes focused on the human delegation as they entered the chamber. Admiral Taman walked with the measured pace of a soldier, flanked by his surviving officers. Admiral Taman of Earth, Vextar said, his voice carrying across the chamber. The Galactic Council owes you an apology. We were wrong to abandon the Volani. We were wrong to call your mission impossible. The chamber erupted in noise as hundreds of species began talking at once. Some were cheering, others were arguing, and many were simply trying to understand what had happened. An ambassador from the warrior Krex species stood up. How did you do it? My people have studied the Harvester swarm for centuries. Every simulation showed that it was unbeatable. Taman looked around the chamber, seeing the faces of beings who had lived in fear for their entire lives. We didn't defeat the swarm with superior technology or overwhelming force. We defeated it by doing things it couldn't predict. What kind of things? Asked a representative from the scholarly Zephyrian Empire. We fought like humans, Commander. Bo Young answered. We used tactics that made no sense to a machine intelligence. We took risks that no rational species would consider. We sacrificed our own lives to protect people we had never met. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The galaxy's most advanced civilizations had been saved by beings they considered primitive monsters from a dangerous world. There's something else, Dr. Inho said, stepping forward. During the battle, we discovered that the Volani have natural abilities that can disrupt swarm technology. It wasn't just human weapons that won this fight, it was cooperation between species with different strengths. Celestar, present as a holographic projection from Lumina Prime, added her own perspective. The humans showed us that different doesn't mean inferior. Their willingness to fight in ways we couldn't imagine, combined with our harmonic abilities, created something neither species could achieve alone. Vextar looked around the chamber, seeing the changed expressions on every face. The Council must vote on a new proposal. I motion that humanity be granted full membership in the Galactic Council, with all rights and privileges. Seconded, called out dozens of voices. All in favor? This time, the response was unanimous. Every voting device in the chamber rose into the air, a show of support that had never been seen before in Council history. But Taman held up his hand. The Council's offer is appreciated, but humanity doesn't want to rule anyone. We just want to make sure this never happens again. What do you propose? Vexatar asked. A new kind of galactic defense force. Not one species trying to dominate others, but all species working together, each contributing their unique strengths to protect the innocent. The idea spread through the chamber like wildfire. For the first time in galactic history, there was talk of real cooperation instead of just political alliances. 3 months later, the first ships of the new Galactic Defense Alliance launched from joint shipyards orbiting neutral space stations. Human engineering was combined with Volani harmonic technology, Krex weapons systems, and Zephyrian scientific advances. The result was a fleet unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Admiral Tay Min stood on the bridge of the new flagship Unity, watching as ships from dozens of species conducted joint training exercises. It was a sight that would have been impossible before the Battle of Lumina Prime. "Admiral," his new communications officer reported, "we're receiving a transmission from Earth." The message was from the lunar memorial that had been built to honor the fallen heroes of the Lumina campaign. Captain Juan's name was carved in crystal provided by the Volani, along with those of every person who had died in the battle. But the most important part of the memorial was not the names of the dead. It was the children who came to visit every day. Human children and Volani youngsters playing together in the memorial gardens. Some of them were the hybrid offspring of humans, and Volani who had met during the refugee evacuation. Dr. Inho, now serving as chief medical officer for the Alliance, watched one such child during his visit to the memorial. The little girl's skin shifted between flesh and living crystal as she laughed, representing the future of galactic cooperation. Her parents met during the evacuation. Inho explained to his companion, xenobiologist Ye Jin. The human father was a rescue pilot. The Volani mother was a refugee scientist. Their daughter is something new in the galaxy. "What do you think she represents?" Ye Jin asked. "Hope," Inho replied simply. "She represents the idea that different species can create something beautiful together." As they watched, the hybrid child ran to the memorial wall and placed her small hand on Captain Juan's name. The crystal responded to her touch, glowing softly and singing a gentle melody that spoke of sacrifice and love. The child turned to her parents with wide eyes. "The crystal is singing about brave people," she said in a voice that carried harmonics no pure human could produce. Her human father knelt down beside her. "Yes, sweetheart. It's singing about people who traveled very far to help others, even when it was dangerous. Like the story you tell me about the monsters who protect people?" "Exactly. Like that story." The child nodded solemnly, then smiled. "I want to be a monster like that when I grow up." Inho felt tears in his eyes as he watched the scene. This was what Captain Juan and the others had died for. Not just to save the Volani, but to create a future where children of different species could dream of protecting each other. The memorial inscription, written in 300 galactic languages, glowed softly in the afternoon light. The words were simple, but they carried the weight of a changed galaxy. They came from the world that could not break them, to save the worlds that should not be broken. Below the main inscription, a smaller plaque had been added recently. It was written in the flowing script of the Volani, but translated for all to read, the Deathworld Lullaby, a song for children who dream of protecting others. From a world of storms and fire, where the strong learn to be kind, came the monsters. We required who left no one behind. When the darkness came to take us, when the void sang songs of fear, Earth's children came to wake us, showing us that hope was near. Now we sing of human courage. Now we tell of Villani song, how together we found storage for a love both deep and strong. Sleep now, children of the stars. Dream of heroes yet to be. Some will carry crystal hearts, some will cross the deepest sea. But whether born of flesh or crystal, whether strong or wise or true, all can choose to be the whistle that calls help when help is due. The lullaby had become popular across the galaxy. Children of dozens of